I'm a painting blogger. Promise fans a live stream of the game when millions of followers are served. During the live broadcast of the game, I frantically lit the crystal on the other side. Boom. Boom. Boris Hume, dressed in a bathrobe, hugged me from behind. So aggressive today, baby. The crystal exploded. I was confused. Fans are crazy. I closed the live broadcast room almost immediately. Boris Hume, I was just live streaming. I pushed him away from him, screaming hoarsely. Somewhat unimpressed, he grabbed a handful of his still dripping hair. So what, big star? I'm going to be finished. I hugged myself with pity. Finished. I'm going to be blown up by Boris Hume's fan net. My mind flew over my sisters-in-law, who stayed on the hot search list. How many are blessed? I closed my eyes and felt the last of the silence. Maybe tomorrow there will be illegitimate fans crawling along the network cable. Lee Noyes, don't you want to open up with me? Boris Hume couldn't grasp my point, and his tone was tainted with grievance. He had just come out of the bath, and the tails of his eyes were red with moisture, hidden under his thick eyelashes, and the red that blinked was like the tail of a butterfly swaying. Drops of hair ran down his chiseled cheeks, dripping on his collarbones, and beneath. I tilted my head. Why don't you get dressed? Boris Hume choked on my question. He rubbed his hair against my neck in anger. It wasn't until I itched and begged him for mercy that he let me go. He punishingly bit the tip of my ear. Lee Noyes, I'm 29 years old, we've been in love for 9 years, and today is the 3,300th day. Boris Hume and I have known each other since we were in high school. He transferred to our school from out of town in his sophomore year of high school. At that time, he had already taken over the play, and he rarely came to school after joining the crew. A lot of the time, I help him bring his homework home. The young Boris Hume pushed open the door, and the sunlight poured down from the boy's back through the tiny gaps in his hair, and illuminated me at that time. Thank you. His voice was cold and gentle, but I haven't been to school for a long time, and there are some questions that I am not very good at. I'll send you the answer when I'm done. As I spoke, I wanted to take a picture of the textbook in his hand. Boris Hume shook his hand at the doorway. I mean, if you have time, can you teach me, squad leader? It has to be said that Boris Hume is a natural actor. Maybe he knew that I ate this, and later he often coquettished me with acting ingredients. I was sullen. I went to Boris Hume's house more and more, from once a week to 3 times a week. He's smart and a quick learner. I caught up with the class in one summer vacation. Thanks to the blessing of going to his house, I was able to escape from my home for a short time. I'll be able to go to school after that, so I don't have to bother you to run both ways. Boris Hume said as he dropped me off leaning against the eaves. It was nearly 7 o'clock, and that was the last time I came home when I tutored him. He looked at the already dark sky outside. I'll send you back. It's dark. It's not safe to walk at night. No, I can do it myself. I hurriedly refused. Haven't you seen the news? A lot of people walk at night and people disappear, not to mention that you are so small. He used his hand to compare my height. He was 178 at the time, but I hadn't crossed his shoulder. I want to insult me without height. 2 people are safer than 1. Your house is not far from my house, a matter of a few steps. He didn't ask his driver to take me off. He turned around and said a word to his parents, and led me outside. That was probably the first time Boris Hume and I held hands. The boy's hand was warm, the fine texture of the palm intertwined with my palm, as if it were pulling my hot blood, and my face was red by the summer evening breeze. I looked up to see Boris Hume. There was a shallow smile on the corner of the boy's mouth, and the moment I looked at him, he seemed to receive a sense of it, and he also looked down at me. There was a vast nebula hidden in his eyes. This is summer, and the fragrance of gardenias breaks into the flower room in my heart, and this romance is broken by the sound of glass slamming and quarreling. My father married my current mother for the 2nd time. They have a child, who is only 4 years old. My father continued to quarrel with my aunt after he got married, and my aunt didn't like me, because my father always compared her to my mother. Inside was the sound of fierce quarrels. I let go of Boris Hume's hand. That's it, thank you. Are you all right? Want to walk a few laps again? Doesn't sound like it's safe in there right now. Boris Hume pointed to my house. I went to Boris Hume's house several times, and never heard his parents quarrel, and his aunt and uncle had a good relationship, so Boris Hume probably doesn't understand my family's situation. For me, our family fights are like a daily occurrence. It's abnormal if it's not noisy or noisy. It's okay. I shook my head, gone. I went home under Boris Hume's uneasy gaze, and as soon as I got home my brother hugged me. Sister, I'm scared. I patted him on the back and heard the woman upstairs scream, Jim Noyes, what are you doing with her? You're a little white-eyed wolf, and your elbows are turned out, aren't you? My brother hugged me a little harder, and he was really scared. I'm all too familiar with that feeling of fear. But what can parents do to quarrel with their children? I kept him behind me. After a while, the woman upstairs was dragged into the room by my dad, and in exchange for screams louder and louder. Sister, I looked at the empty table on the table. Have you eaten? Jim Noyes shook his head. When I took Jim Noyes out the door, Boris Hume was still standing in front of my house. He didn't go. Boris Hume was relieved when he saw me come out. Are you okay? Before I could answer, Jim Noyes' little head poked out from behind me. Who is this uncle? Hearing the word uncle, Boris Hume's face instantly darkened. He holds back the fire and asks Jim Noyes to call him brother along the way, correcting Jim Noyes' name. It wasn't until he bought Jim Noyes ice cream that Jim Noyes called him brother. Jim Noyes was playing on the slide, and Boris Hume and I were sitting next to him. Thank you. This is the second time I've thanked him tonight. Boris Hume laughed. I can't sleep anyway, so I should take a walk and eat. He didn't ask me much about the family, just quietly accompanied me to feel the evening breeze, and none of us spoke again. It wasn't until he sent me home again that he said, Lee Noyes, because I know you, I want you to be a little happier than everyone else. Lee Noyes, let's get married. 13 years ago, 16-year-old Boris Hume, and now 29-year-old Boris Hume coincided before my eyes. He buried his head back in my neck. Promise me, please. But my family of origin made me very afraid of marriage. I was afraid of living the same life as my stepmother, and I was afraid that my married life would not be worth the firewood, rice, oil, and salt. I'm even more afraid that Boris Hume may not love me that much. We're like this now, isn't it? My words were not spoken, interrupted by a ringing cell phone. Across the phone was Boris Hume's agent, Jackson. Are you crazy? Look at the hot search list. Jackson's anger seemed to burst out from across the phone. I turned on my phone and looked at the hot search of the entertainment list. Pound Boris Hume in love pound. Pound Boris Hume called baby pound. Pound Boris Hume iron tree blossom pound. Pound Boris Hume girlfriend pound. Hugged. The hot search also exploded. Boris Hume let go of me and pinched my eyebrows impatiently, and said to the other end of the line, then go public. His slightly cool fingertips hooked my hanging hair, and when he raised his eyes, he met my eyes, and his eyes were full of sincere love. It's time to make it public after hiding it for so long. After Boris Hume became public online, my account skyrocketed in followers overnight. Although I was not ridiculed by the Imagine group, there was still a lot of criticism. I can only temporarily suspend my account and suspend my work. In order to hide from his fans and paparazzi, I had to hide in my house every day. Boris Hume is surrounded by people who bring me the necessities of life. The curtains were drawn on all sides. I can't tell the difference between day and night. Just stay in such an enclosed space for a full week. I started to think, if I do get married in the future, will my life be like this? I started my account when I was a graduate student. It took 5 years to become a $1 million blogger. I had a stable independent income, and left the family that scared me. I yearn for a free and unfettered life. But if I marry Boris Hume, everything about me will be monitored all the time. Even my family will be picked up and talked about. I let out a long sigh of relief. I don't want to live like that. When Boris Hume came back to me, it was the evening of the 8th day. The crescent moon is like a hook, and the night dissolves. Lee Noyes. Boris Hume hugged me from the floor to ceiling window. I'm sorry. I shook my head. He opened the food box he had brought, and placed it on the table. It's because I'm too anxious. I didn't think it would be like this. Boris Hume and I apologize. Sooner or later, isn't it? I stroked the top of his soft hair. He had just come back from the pictorial shoot, and his makeup had not yet been removed. I pulled a makeup towel from the side and wiped it for him. My fingertips slid over his forehead, his eye sockets, and the bridge of his nose. His eyebrows were slightly lowered, and my shadow was reflected in his eyes. When this time is over, I'll take a vacation, and we'll go on a trip. Didn't you say you wanted to go to Paris last time? Then let's go to the Arc de Triomphe first, and then to the Seine. For some reason, Boris Hume grew quieter and quieter the more he spoke, with a slight tremor. In a trance, his warm palm covered my wrist. The encounter of two hot currents drives the feelings that belong to us alone. His face pressed against my palm, rubbing it carefully. Sort me out, Lee Noyes. A drop of water slid by, bringing me back to my senses. Why are you crying? I wiped away the tears from the cuffs of my pajamas. I thought I couldn't call you back. During the summer vacation of my junior year of high school, I almost skipped the building once. At that time, I was admitted to the school of my dreams, and when I came home to share the news, no one was happy for me. Maybe it's because there's no one to be happy with. It's so far from the test. Don't you plan to come back in the future? At the dinner table, my father asked, I won't send you there. You have to go yourself. That's right, girls are so far away from the exam, and they can't find anyone to be bullied. The stepmother followed the father. They found resonance in belittling me, and the more they talked, the more energetic they became. At that time, I didn't understand that some parents would also be jealous of their children, and could only prove their success through verbal suppression. All I know is that no one in this world loves me. No one wants to share the joy with me. They want to empathize with me. No one wants me to live well from the bottom of their hearts. I went out and walked around to the top of the building, and the moon of that night was crooked, like a sharp hook, like a scythe in the hands of the grim reaper. It was a summer night, but it was very windy. The stars in the night were like stairs built for me, stacked little by little, guiding me to the crescent. I have stretched out my feet by the devil, but my angel did not let me fall. I was dragged into a hot, powerful embrace. Are you crazy? It was the first time I saw Boris Hume in such a mess, his shirt wrinkled and his hair tossed by the wind. Can't you hear me screaming so loudly? He yelled at me for the first time, too. I didn't cry when I was questioned by my father, and I didn't cry when I was belittled by my mother, but the helplessness that surrounded me with Boris Hume's roar suddenly became stronger. I shook my head tremblingly. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Boris Hume's breath was short. He must have just run up. He took a tissue from his pocket to wipe my tears, and when he finally found that he couldn't stop at all, he held me tightly in his arms. I don't blame you. Boris Hume tilted his head to the side uncomfortably. I'm afraid you can't think about it. Then I won't have a class leader to help me with tuition in the rest of my life. I'm going to collect the money later. Okay, I'll try to afford it. A hairy skull popped out of the staircase. Jim Noyes blinked. You're all hugging each other with joy. Jim Noyes saw my tears, came over and pulled Boris Hume away, and kicked him heavily. Uncle, didn't you say that you would be happy if you made a cake? Jim Noyes tugged at my cuff and grimaced. Sister can't cry. If you cry, you'll cry away. At least that night, Boris Hume hugged me in the moment. Then everything went smoothly and we fell in love. I'm sorry. I apologized to Boris Hume. It's almost let's go wash our face. I tossed the makeup towel into the trash can on the side. Boris Hume was in no hurry to leave. He bowed his head as I stood up, touching my forehead. Don't tell me I'm sorry. You didn't do anything wrong, baby. The more Boris Hume spoke, the more his voice grew, and he began to learn from Jim Noyes. I don't blame my sister Tilda. I knew Boris Hume was handsome, but I looked away. He chases. I moved away again. You've got cleansing oil left on your face, I remind. Jim Noyes was stunned for a moment, and his head, which he was about to put on, stopped in place. That's good. We're all going to wash our faces. Boris Hume had a light sleep. I was afraid of disturbing him, so we always slept in separate rooms. But tonight he's going to be with me. I poked the back lying next to me. Do you know why I'm sleeping separately from you? I know. I don't sleep well in the middle of the night. I'll box. It doesn't matter. I'll snatch your quilt too. Boris Hume turned around and buried himself in my chest and muttered, then we're married, and we'll sleep separately. This time, the person who turned around and chose to turn his back became me. The man who poked me became Boris Hume. Boris Hume's question seemed to puncture the bubble in the deepest part of my heart. Lee Noyes, are you afraid of your married life with me? I nodded. Boris Hume smiled and turned off the lamp at my bedside. In the dark, the corner of his mouth tapped lightly on my forehead. It's okay. Then let's take our time. Boris Hume went crazy to work in order to take a vacation. On my side, because netizens have found new melons, it has improved slightly. The days are back on track. We're also back to the way we started when we got together and left more. The only difference is that Boris Hume used to go home when he left the group, but now he comes back to my house. I looked at home, and many things went from one to a pair. It occurred to me that I had not responded to Boris Hume's official announcement on the internet, so I released my new work. I drew a picture of Boris Hume when I was removing makeup with a makeup remover. The big paintings are all about Boris Hume. It's knocked. When will my wife broadcast again? I swiped through the comments of netizens under my latest work. Boris Hume, on the other hand, almost immediately reposted my online message with an emoji, love. I see it. It's beautiful. You're amazing. A message popped up from him. Me, what are you doing? Boris Hume, I'm resting. I'm about to hang the coercion. Me, stay safe. Boris Hume, okay. You have to take care of your rest, too. Boris Hume hasn't heard from me since then, and I'm back to work. I got the call 3 hours later. Jackson called to say that Boris Hume had fallen from the pressure while filming, and that he was not in danger in the hospital. I took a taxi and hurried to the address Jackson had sent me. It was raining lightly outside the window, and the raindrops were beating on the window. When I arrived, there was already a crowd of people outside Boris Hume's hospital room. I tried to squeeze in to look at Boris Hume, but was stopped. Why are you here now? A sharp female voice spoke to the female lead of the play. Luna, do you know how long Boris Hume has been in it? Luna glanced me up and down and said disdainfully, call him when you need him, and abandon him when you don't. What exactly do you think of him? Are you a tool to make money and gain traffic? I caught a glimpse of someone holding a cell phone in the corner. I took a step back, and the camera of the phone turned. It's filming me and Luna. Want to hype up the movie with Boris Hume after it hits the shelves? And why is there no doctor or nurse to take care of her yelling in the hospital? Seeing that I ignored her, Luna turned to the camera, pretending to be delicate, and wiped her hand over her cheeks, which were not tears at all. He will be cold when he wakes up, and knows that you are the last to come. Isn't this coming? Don't bark. I pushed her away, and went inside. Fuck. It's annoying. Where are the families? The nurse in the operating room came out and asked. For a moment, there was silence. Generally, in TV dramas, it is not a good thing for doctors to ask this kind of question. Don't you have any family? Jackson hurriedly stepped forward to explain. We were just on the set. and it happened suddenly, and we haven't had time to notify us yet. I'm his fiancé." "Okay," I interrupted Jackson and asked the nurse. "It's like Luna said. If there is an accident and there is no loved one by my side, I have experienced that feeling, and I don't want the person I like to experience it too. 9 years. 9 years of affection. I can't live in the next person in my heart." The nurse froze for a moment. "Oh, of course, when the patient wakes up, he will be pushed out later, and sent directly to the next observation room, and someone will stay with him for the night." Boris Hume suffered a broken leg and was put in a cast, and doctors said it would take about 3 months to repair. His film was forced to halt the filming schedule. Our planned vacation was also in vain. Lee Noyes, "I'm sorry." Boris Hume drank white porridge and apologized to me. I knew he was talking about the holiday. "It's like a hospital vacation." I paused, for Boris Hume did look very lost. His eyebrows, which had been raised, were now down, and his eyes were not as bright as before. "Anyway, it's 2 people on vacation, and now we're 2 people too. Except for the location, it's all the same." I comforted him. "What time is today?" Boris Hume asked me. "July the 10th. He sighed and pulled out a small box from his coat pocket. "It's all ready. I even have a venue booked, and I'm ready to propose to you today." Boris Hume lifted his still plaster leg slightly. "You see, I'm broken now, and I can't seem to kneel." I shoved the little box back into his arms. "Then I'll wait until you're ready." But Boris Hume didn't want to, and took me by the hand and tried to put it on me. "Can't wait. I've seen the video, and someone is crying in front of the operating room, and saying it's my fiancé." My face instantly turned red. "Where did you see that?" I punched him angrily. He snorted bitterly, turned on his phone, and pointed to the hot search list. "Now the whole network praises you, as a good sister-in-law." "I can do my business, and I can take care of a disabled patient." Luna's team put that video online last night, but only the first half was cut, and she pointed at my nose and scolded me. But in the early hours of the morning, I don't know which enthusiastic netizen came out and directly sent a surveillance video with sound. A man dressed in black was filming me with his phone, and this surveillance video even recorded the second half. In the silent silence, my fiancé amplified it silently. With a single word, the relationship between me and Boris Hume was announced, and an indelible seal was stamped between us. The meaning of marriage is not to drag each other down, but to encourage each other in life. Perhaps, in a way, I was married to Boris Hume a long time ago. He saved me that night, and I might have lit up his life at some point in 9 years. We are just short of a certificate that proves the relationship. His kiss fell solemnly, resting on the ring finger he had worn for me. "Promise me, please." I know it's abrupt to say, but the first time we met was on July the 10th. And that was the first time you came to my house to give me homework, because that day, we had the opportunity to get to know each other. I know that my uncle and aunt have made you scared about married life, but I don't care. I can spend all my time waiting for you. As long as you come home, I will always be there. If the old home can't be your harbor from the wind and rain, then build a new one, and hope that the new harbor will always be a rainbow without wind and rain. Here is a port. I will no longer sail in search of love. I'll just stand here waiting for you. I love you forever here. After Boris Hume was discharged from the hospital, he officially moved into my home. Big star, you moved from the mansion to my apartment, and you were wronged. I quipped him on the shoulder. I think too, but you're used to living here. Boris Hume looked around for a moment, pulled down his mask and hat. Wait a while, we'll move me. He took a few photos of the interior of the room and the design of the decoration with his mobile phone. I didn't pay attention to it at first, until when I moved into his house. The master bedroom was exactly the same as mine. When we moved into his renovated villa, it was already 4 months later. I talked to my partner that night and came home late. Boris Hume drove to pick me up. He didn't go home. He drove straight back to the villa where he used to live. That doesn't seem to be the right direction, I said, pointing to the navigation. The corners of Boris Hume's mouth curled slightly. Wait a minute, let's go somewhere first. There were no lights on in the house, and moonlight poured in through the windowsill, illuminating the floor beneath our feet. Boris Hume took me by the hand, and led me into the room that had been prepared for a long time. You are not used to moving, and the change of environment is unfamiliar to you. So this is the same as your previous room layout. He pointed to the 2 lamps at the head of the bed, the 2 pairs of slippers in the shoe closet, and the pairs of items in the bathroom. And he stood on one knee in the light moonlight, and knelt down to make up for the ritual that had not been performed before. Miss Lee Noyes, thank you for being a part of my life. He took me home. I met his parents again. When my aunt saw me coming, she whispered to Boris Hume, "You kid, you can be regarded as bringing people back." Their whispers were so loud that I could hear them all. Mom, don't rush to get married later. Auntie glanced at him. Whatever you do, I don't care. Auntie said that she wanted to hold my hand. Good girl. You have told me all the Boris Hume you like to eat. Today is what you like to eat. You can eat more later. I looked at Boris Hume suspiciously, and Boris Hume spread his hands to me. She asked me earlier if my partner was the class leader, who kept giving me makeup lessons. I said yes, and when I told her about it, she felt sorry for you, and said she would make up for what you had lost. Boris Hume took an orange and sat down on the couch. That's how my mom is. She treats whoever she likes. Does Auntie like me very much? Boris Hume paused and handed me the peeled orange. To be exact, our family loves you. The dusk outside, staining the clouds with a faint powder, like strawberry-flavored marshmallows, soaked my whole body in a sealed sugar jar. Boris Hume and I looked at each other, our eyes reflecting each other's reflections, the shadows in our pupils dilating as I was about to close them. Boris Hume's dad suddenly appeared and interrupted our kissing. Whoever of you said you wanted to see the stars before? Boris Hume's father, still with a telescope in his hand, beckoned embarrassedly. I'm sorry to disturb you. You go on, go on. I lowered my face all at once. Color makes you faint. Color makes you faint. Didn't you say you wanted to see the stars? Boris Hume poked me. Let's go. My dad just bought a new telescope. Boris Hume and I went up to the 2nd floor, and my uncle helped us get our gear up. I didn't see the stars, only the moon. The moon was not curved. It did not carry a sharp hook. The night set it off incomparably soft, and it was its eternal brilliance. Could the moon be so gentle? I thought to myself. That's right, it doesn't seem to be too cold this winter. Boris Hume, you go down first, and I'll talk to Lee Noyes, Uncle instructed on the side. Boris Hume nodded. When I turned around, Boris Hume was standing on the other side of the sliding door. Lee Noyes, my mom and I both know your environment when you were a child, and we don't think there's anything wrong with you. Just a little bit. I was stunned. When I was in a relationship with Boris Hume, I didn't tell my parents, and even if I did, it wouldn't affect them. But Boris Hume is different. He is an actor and a public figure. He lives in the spotlight and every side of him is known to the public. His life has been smooth sailing, with a happy family, a thriving career, a glittering fame and titles, and none of them seem to have regrets or shortcomings. If marriage becomes the darkest stroke in his life, even divorce cannot be erased. That ink dot will always be there. We all want you to love yourself a little bit more and be more confident. My uncle patted me on the shoulder. You were born in the mud. You grew up hard, strong and gentle, and you have defeated many people. We can't choose between parents and birth. It's purely luck. But bad luck is never your fault. Obviously every child deserves to be loved, but some people can't learn to love others. I looked at Boris Hume on the other side and smiled. I know why he is always shining and determined. His ability to empathize seems to be innate, because that's what happened to his parents. Thank you, Uncle. No thanks. I told him to come back and watch the stars with you, for a while. The second time, I saw the starry sky. They were scattered under the curtain of night, very bright. Finally hit me too. After leaving Boris Hume's house, we walked down the streets that were too familiar to be known. Boris Hume. Hey, would you like to visit my house? I asked him a question. Boris Hume looked at me. Are you sure? It's not appropriate for us to be empty-handed now. Right, I'll go to my house and get some. As he spoke, Boris Hume walked smoothly. I thought it was a little funny. It's okay. There's a fruit shop next to our house. Let's just buy a fruit basket. How's that going to work? When the time comes, will your family still think I kidnapped you? Boris Hume shook his head. Tomorrow. I'll go back tomorrow. I'll get ready for. Our family doesn't care about that. I sighed. They won't say anything even if you're empty-handed. At most. Jim Noyes said a few words. My father and stepmother knew the news, and wouldn't say anything at all. They only think of me when they're angry. They won't empathize with me when they are happy like this. Didn't I know it when I was a junior in high school? Lee Noyes. Boris Hume hugged me tightly. I'll love you for them. So don't be discouraged. Boris Hume and I bought a fruit basket, and Boris Hume went to the supermarket next door to buy a few bars of tobacco and alcohol. When I knocked on the door, it was Jim Noyes. Hey, why are you here together? Later, when Jim Noyes learned of the purpose, he sat across from Boris Hume, as if to keep an eye on him. My father casually struck up a few words with Boris Hume. When did you meet? High school. High school. I met your mom in high school. I whispered to myself. Don't curse me. That's nice. The stepmother next to me gave my father a stab in the eye. Seeing that he was about to start arguing, Jim Noyes suddenly said, Mom, do you have any words? The stepmother went to look for it. The stepmother is still sober. At least she never has any unwarranted anger with her own son. I looked at Jim Noyes, and quietly gave him a thumbs up. Jim Noyes sent me and Boris Hume out the door. Have they been arguing lately? Jim Noyes nodded. But it's a lot less than before, mainly because I don't study well, and they rarely quarrel when they focus on my homework. I laughed self-deprecatingly. From elementary school to high school, no one ever cared about my homework. They love you so much, because they're your mom and dad too. Sister, when will you come back? Jim Noyes asked. I glanced at Boris Hume, who was waiting for me, in the car in the distance, and said, Come back when you're free. When we went to visit our parents last night, we were photographed by the paparazzi. I finally knew why Boris Hume was reluctant to let me out when he first went public. The paparazzi from that perspective should be hiding in a tree. The photos that can be taken are still clear. Boris Hume's turn. Enthusiastic netizens even gave Boris Hume a picture, happy to the point of crutching. My online private messages have changed from most reminders to, when is my wife getting married? Is it the same frequency of updates after getting married as it is now? Will it be broadcast live when there are tens of millions of fans? Do you have a chance to draw a manga? Drawing it into a comic. I've thought about it. So I contacted the editor and tried to polish my story with Boris Hume into a comic. The fire tree rises in the wind, and the light pushes you towards me. When I came out with the first chapter, it exploded all over the internet. There are even entertainment companies that want to buy my copyright directly and sign it for film and television. Until I saw the collaborators. Jackson sat across from him and drank tea. Boris Hume won't let me order wine. The boss on the other side smiled. It turns out that everyone is an acquaintance, so it's more convenient to cooperate. Boris Hume sat beside me and whispered to me, Why is your copyright so expensive? Costing me years of my salary. I pushed him away for some reason. Then why did you buy it? The money is coming in and out, and none of us have any income. Boris Hume's eyebrows raised slightly. You're drawing me. Can I let someone else play me? What do you think? Heroine. On July the 10th, the movie was released. A box office hit. Netizens said, contribute a movie ticket, and I will be your follower. On the day of the release, Boris Hume and I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get a marriage certificate. We posted it online, but the one sent by Boris Hume is a bit dirty. He sent a picture with 4 words, "Brother has a wife." We had a vacation, and this time it wasn't a vacation, it's a honeymoon. We traveled all over the city we wanted to visit. I also bought a map of the world, ticked a circle on it, and chose the next place to travel. When did you like me? When Boris Hume was cooking, I asked Boris Hume. Boris Hume was stunned for a moment. A long time ago, I took on a play where I was going to play an unhappy but brave child, but I couldn't find that feeling until you made up for me. At that time, my mother broke a bowl, and you wanted to pick up the pieces on the ground for my mother. And when my father heard the sound and walked over, you subconsciously stood in front of my mother. At that time, I wondered what your life was like. What makes you act like that when you are a teenager? It is the opportunity for the beginning of love. And then I have seen you who have been crushed into pieces countless times, but each of your fragments reflects a different light hidden in you. Strong, gentle, and persistent. At that time, I was thinking, how nice it would be to not let you break it again. You're supposed to be perfect and beautiful. The sun was shining on Boris Hume's side, and he took my hand in the setting sun. The rings on our ring fingers collided. Shadows overlap in the sunlight. In this way, we can hold on until the mountains and rivers go down. Thank you for holding me in the moment. Ends. Boris Hume Extra. I transferred to another school in my sophomore year of high school, received my first play, and met the love of my life. The director said that my integration with the character was too poor. Let me take advantage of school to experience more of life. But I rarely go to school because I still have a job of shooting pictorials. I was worried when the girl appeared. She rang my doorbell. "Hello, are you Boris Hume?" The girl's voice was soft. "The teacher asked me to give you your homework." "What kind of teacher?" "I haven't been to my new school report yet, so you send me your homework first." "I haven't registered yet, but I'm not going to do it." I leaned against the eaves behind me, and the girl was very small, just above my shoulders. The boy's stubborn mind suddenly came to life. "Oh, okay then, I'll send you the answer." She said she was about to take my homework back. Everyone else is like that anyway. That's not what I meant. I'm damned. So I bowed my head for the first time. "I mean, can you teach me?" Class leader. I found that Lee Noyes was different from the rest of my classmates. She was always the last to come home from class. Doesn't she want to go home? It just so happens that I can't do a question. I invited her to tutor me. Lee Noyes hesitated for a moment, long enough for me to think she would reject me. "Okay." The girl put the book in her bag. "But you'll stay with me until 6 o'clock before I leave school." I later learned that she was hiding from her father when he came home from work. Her father would pick up Jim Noyes from daycare when he got off work, and she didn't want to see it, so she chose to run away. Lee Noyes and I are getting closer and closer. I finished my homework late that day, and it got dark early in the winter. The street lights in the neighborhood are broken. I don't worry about her going home alone. That was the first time I saw Lee Noyes' life. There were frequent quarrels in their house, so it's no wonder she didn't like to go home. "That's it." The girl pulled out a smile. I was a little worried. "It doesn't matter, right? I can walk with you a few more laps." She shook her head and pushed the door in. At that moment, I couldn't move my legs. I felt as if I was pushing her back into that endless abyss. I stopped and lingered in front of her house. There was a white stray cat, and it was covered in dirt. "But it's beautiful." I wanted to touch it, but as soon as I got closer, it was scared away. Lee Noyes came out of the house. She was a little shocked, and I was still standing there. I figured out how to make amends. Fortunately, her younger brother, who can call her uncle, is a social cow. I've been having trouble concentrating in class lately. I always sneak in to see Lee Noyes. Lee Noyes' seat wasn't close to me. She was by the door and I was by the window. She sat in the second row, and I sat in the last row. She is very well behaved, even in class, taking notes and solving problems very carefully. I started looking forward to the time when she gave me makeup lessons every day. I don't know when I had a different emotion for her. Tell her later. Wait for her to finish the college entrance examination. The day the acceptance letter was sent, my movie came out, thanks to Lee Noyes, and I blended well with the character. I took Jim Noyes to buy a big cake. Lee Noyes told me about her cut-off score, and she got into her dream university. Double happiness is here to celebrate. I once asked Lee Noyes, "What do you want to do when you get into college?" The girl frowned slightly. I didn't think about it, but at least I can stay away from this home, and be a little free. But Jim Noyes didn't find her at home. Jim Noyes came out of the house with the cake hanging down. Mom said my sister went out crying. Jim Noyes shook his head. I don't know where I went. My left eye was pounding, and I was screaming in my heart. After looking around, I finally found her on the top of the building. Lee Noyes. I yelled her name, but she seemed to have been tricked, moving forward step by step. Are you crazy? Lee Noyes. Just as she took that step, I grabbed it. Got you. I'm in a hurry. I almost lost my love. I'm almost going to watch you say goodbye to me. Are you crazy? Can't you hear me screaming so loudly? The girl was so frightened by my yelling that I thought she was cold, and I put the sunscreen I had brought over her, until she trembled and cried, repeating her sorry over and over again. I probably know what kind of life she used to live every day. Are you being subjected to endless abuse and beatings? Will it make you subconsciously think that you have done something wrong, and apologize first when you accept kindness? I sighed, and I seemed to be enveloped in powerlessness. I don't know how to save her. I hugged hard. Do you feel my heartbeat? Lee Noyes. Then I hope that you will always be loved, always free and passionate. The end.